Hey everyone, welcome to the That's Allowed podcast. This is your hostess, Dr. Audrey-Ann McKeon, and today I have Laurie McDonald. Laurie, please introduce yourself.
I am a clinical hypnotherapist at a clinic here in Sacramento, California. I specialize in very specific trauma. I work with all inner child work and earlier childhood trauma, but I tend to also get people who have had meganormal or paranormal experiences, and they are looking for some form of resolution and understanding to some of the things that have happened to them. I'm also the president of a nonprofit organization called Opus. Opus is an organization to provide support for people who have hit that wall in their core belief system and don't know what to believe. And so we can provide support to that.
That's so wonderful. I'm so excited to talk about all of this, but I'll start with my first question, which is what I always start with. What story is the world not getting?
The story right now that I think the world isn't quite getting is that they are the walking wounded. That right now, with some 21st century forward thinking, we have an opportunity to begin a healing process that will envelop the entire world. You want to change the world, change yourself. That's the first place to begin. And when we see those open wounds, I believe that once the healing begins, we have the ability to become cycle breakers and to stop any form of abuse, not just in our own generation, but perhaps even create a healing for generations past.
Absolutely. I really believe that when you heal in the present, you can actually change the past. That's one of my core beliefs. So what called you to this work?
Well, even from the earliest memories I have, my older siblings and other kids called me mom because I would, in a non-judgmental way, try to redirect their behavior. I wasn't bossy at all. No, no, I
You had
actually,
strong leadership skills.
absolutely, I think at a very early age, I had the ability to understand the higher frequency emotions like compassion, empathy, mercy, pity. I felt those things, and I was quite resourceful and naive and believing that at that time it would be so simple just to tell people what they needed to hear, and that was enough to make them heal. But wounds and trauma, you can talk for 10 years to a therapist and they'll tell you some very logical things, but trauma is illogical. Those emotions are illogical. So there's some form of disconnect between what you're understanding and what you're feeling. There's an emotional body, there's a mind, a subconscious, a mind to process. Sorry, I'm going to turn that
It's
off.
fine.
I apologize. In fact, I thought I'd already done it. It's been getting spooky around here.
Yeah. So you felt called to this work, and what was your journey into it?
Mm. Well, I experienced a lot of trauma, and it put me in a unique position to understand when you're put in a place of powerlessness, you can see the use and abuse of somebody else's power. And I was very fortunate in understanding I had a strong moral compass, and I knew for sure there was something wrong with them, not me. And that was my saving grace.
Yeah.
And so that was really the instigator. But I actually did some inner child work when I was in my late 20s. I was going to be a psychologist, maybe even a psychiatrist, and did some inner child work with a local hypnotherapist. And that was it. I was fundamentally shifted and changed. And it felt absolutely remarkable. And so I began to make steps to go into school and then eventually led to a private practice.
Why do you think that inner child work is so powerful?
Well, I believe that all relationships are ruled by the inner child. Until that inner child is healed, if you're in a relationship and you're feeling insecure, jealous, it's the inner child. The inner child is feeling insecure and jealous. You have to create a strong foundation so that the rest of the emotions can begin to grow. I like to incorporate a lot of chakra work. I believe that the root chakra is where the inner child resides.
Mm.
And it's quite easy to see when a child is wounded because of the way a person responds in relationships and where they are in a particular place of empowerment. Each chakra actually relates to a particular behavior and frequency. And when we begin to work the mind and the body and the spirit, of course, we have a stronger, more sure-footed, holistic approach to healing. And the foundation is the inner child.
Absolutely. So, moving beyond that, so you work with people who've had experiences that are, you said, extra normal, paranormal, whatever you want to,
Yeah.
however, whatever word you want to use, right? That
Yeah.
adds a completely different layer, right? Too, of this is so far outside of what I thought was reality, and yet here it is. And so, how do you help people come to terms with that?
Well, I explained to them a little bit about reality, perhaps things they may have or should have perhaps learned or had incorporated into their belief system in their early years. But primarily, I begin with the definition of the word human. The word human was originally a compound word. Hue is the word we use to measure the depth or saturation of light. We measure that in hues. It's the intensity of the light.
Yeah.
And man comes from the word manifestation, to come into the physical or to be embodied. A human is a light embodied being, and race and gender are subcategories of that particular definition. And when you know what you are, it makes it easier to begin to learn to express or tap into at least the true self, the multidimensional self, the spiritual self. We begin to see that our experiences are great teachers. And there's an energetic difference between asking, why did this happen to me? And what can I do to feel better? Why and what, little words, but when we use them correctly. So I teach words. Um, and it's important that in a world of duality, there we understand that words have a hard side, a soft side. Everything has a flip side. And when we can move to a place of higher perspective with from a non-judgmental, non-emotional place, a place of equanimity, we begin to see that we can self-accept, the good, the bad, the indifferent. And at the moment we embrace that, the inner dialogue begins to relax. It just needs to be heard, to be accepted, and we begin to move. I created 5 steps to personal empowerment and inner peace. I'm writing that, and hopefully we'll have that book completed soon. But it teaches the ability to self-accept, which leads to self-soothing, of course, ultimately self-love. But these things can generate deep feelings of change inside of the chakra system. And words have power. They have great power. Words are so powerful, they can change your DNA because they carry through a neurotransmitter an emotion. It's energy in motion, and we get to see how it applies. And the earth, it's a beautiful place. And so the sooner we begin to do this healing, self-acceptance and self-love, we'll become empowered and then really begin to generate those feelings of inner peace. And so teaching that first off, to somebody whose core belief system on reality has changed, helps them understand a little bit more about their place in the world, their place in the universe. And we can begin to look at what created or expanded their particular consciousness. I did and have worked with many people who have experienced eye to eye, face to face contact with what we are calling extraterrestrial beings. They could be interdimensional, and there are other quantum physics options that we can begin to look at to see what they might be.
Sure.
But what we do know for sure is that from the beginning of time, man has interacted on some level with these entities. Some have called them angels, some have called them demons. And if we believe in the beautiful works of angels, then we must accept the work of a demon, because this is the duality. And then you'll begin to see that when you're coming from a higher place of empowerment, good doesn't fight. There is no fight between good and bad, right? Good just doesn't fight. And so if you're still conceptualizing those, then you haven't yet freed the inner mind. And that personal empowerment allows you to be with anyone from any race or culture, with any belief system, and allow them their journey without having to impose our thoughts or beliefs through religion or politics, which creates an instability in their core system. They become defensive. And if you're defending, you're no longer in power. So it's about empowerment, I guess is a very long answer, but it really is all about personal empowerment and utilizing these experiences as a catalyst to a more broadened consciousness, a more expanded understanding of the multiverse, because we'll all soon find out that those dimensions and so forth do exist.
So how has that how have you come to those realizations? What are some of the experiences that you've had that have kind of opened you up to realizing, wow, this isn't all there is?
Well, the truth is, from a very young age, I always had this sort of violet light that was so beautifully bright. It was like it was illuminated from within, because it was bright but soft, and it would form some form of female energy entity, and never really gave me anything but guided me into learning on my own. And then about 15, I guess, when you're at that age of going, what, that can't be real. Am I crazy? Yeah, we ask these questions.
Yeah, of course.
I was experiencing the phenomena in the moment and asked for a physical manifestation. And I said, I'm not afraid, but touch me so that I know that it's real. And I absolutely had a hand placed in mine.
Wow.
Warmth, energy that moved through me with a sort of an unconditional love and acceptance. So it allowed me to continue to feel strong and believe what I believe. And I have seen things. And so the world and the universe is beautiful and broad, and it's teeming with all forms of life. And scientifically, we look at people who have had near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences, or any type of phenomena that removes you from the physical body, so that you can begin to see, oh, that's me, but I still have my consciousness, my personality. And so for a time, I've been a meditator since, only serious for about 40 years, but I did actually start when I was 12 with the TM but didn't get back into it again until I was almost 17, and have been pretty good since then at practicing, which is really what it's all about, you know. But during that practice, for a time, I continuously would jump or pop out of my body every time, every moment in the day. If I relaxed, I was outside of the body, viewing myself. And I was thinking, well, how far can I go? What does this mean? And later had an extraordinarily lucid dream. I dreamed I saw this temple, and it was Buddhist, and I could smell sandalwood and fruit and all of these other layers and textures in dreams that don't normally exist. And it was so incredibly profound and strong in the morning that I drove around on the outside of town here aimlessly down side roads and over by the farming land. And sure enough, came upon the very temple that I had dreamed about.
Wow.
And I went and parked the car, and I came up to these two huge iron gates, and there were two female monks standing there, and the gates were partly opened. And I walked over, and they said, "Why have you come?" I said, "I've come to meditate." And they said, "How did you know about us?" And I said, "I dreamed you." And one flew off to bring back the master, and they opened the gates. And for the next probably 4 or 5 years, I learned more about how to control my own mind and thoughts, more about other worlds than I've learned in the plus 1,000 extraterrestrial abduction cases that I've worked. They did show me, taught me things that I think maybe were already inherent, that as we begin to grow, we pull pieces of our pasts together to create a stronger whole. And they did teach me. And I used to bring my son, and he learned to meditate, and he's 33 now, and he still uses that meditation practice. And so you just, those things, what is that? Destiny? Is that fate? You know, I believe fate or circumstances of your life, but ultimately we all end up fulfilling our destiny. And if we're aware and look for it, we'll find it. But it's self-healing, self-acceptance, self-love, maybe understanding that we were all born good enough. When we're relaxed, we'll see we have enough. We'll have enough money or food or time or sleep. You know, when I can't sleep, if I wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning, I tell myself, well, I probably got enough sleep. And I get up and I just do wonderful things. And I love it. It's a great time to be up, and it's quiet. And back in my youth, I may have looked at the clock as my enemy, and it was like, oh, I only have like 2.5 more hours. I have to get back to sleep. And I would have created this anxiety. I would have created.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I decide not to create it and trust that maybe I've had enough sleep. And so it's just a more relaxed approach. And it's an overall faith, though. I trust the universe is providing the opportunities and lessons that we need to learn.
Absolutely. I think surrender has been my big word for this year. Just
Mm.
learning the art of surrender and trust. I think a lot of
Yeah,
people.
it's a two-way street, you know, in that, with this duality on our planet, masculine, feminine, love. Some people are great givers, but they have a hard time receiving.
Yeah.
And having a hard time receiving falls under the trust. But there are only two things on this planet to master as we move towards human attainment. One is love, and one is fear. So if we're not feeling secure enough to surrender or trust, I like to do the solar plexus exercise, you know, where you place your hands on the solar plexus, just under the rib cage and above the navel, and just breathing into that in a very relaxed, non-judgmental way. You just ask yourself, what am I afraid of?
Mm.
Just and sit with that for a moment. And whatever the fear is, will like effervescently come up into the conscious mind. And you can then ask, is this a real fear or an imagined fear? And if it's not happening right now, it's imagined. It
Right.
might happen or did or could, it's imagined. So you need to let that go. If it is happening, if it's real, you simply move back in and you ask yourself, what is my next empowered step? Trusting the power, the subconscious mind, the solar plexus. Your next empowered step will become apparent. And with that, you're not in between anymore. You're moving forward. And you can just let go. And why not? Just let go. What's the worst thing that can happen?
I love that. So, who would you say needs to hear this?
Well, I think it's okay for everyone to be in a place where they can be open-minded and take what resonates with them, begin to see that everything is much bigger. And here we are, we're just rather small. I'm 5'8", which is really tiny when you look at me in perspective to the country or the planet. Pull back a little bit and check me out in our galaxy and I'm gone. I'm only going to live, maybe not quite as long as some of the beautiful trees on the property here, 80, 90 years. And I want to use this time to get the bigger picture, to understand. And it all begins with self-acceptance. And maybe we can all do a little bit more of that. And with that self-acceptance, we learn a human superpower, forgiveness. And we can forgive ourselves because, we make mistakes, but you learn from your mistakes. And I've learned so much from my mistakes. I should probably make some more. Maybe I have. so it's forgiveness and having an open mind, but it's forgiving ourselves. We're all perfectly imperfect, and all roads ultimately will lead to a higher expanded consciousness, a more understanding of the mind, the body, and the spirit. So, and having those opportunities to either investigate, near-death experiences, past life regression work, out-of-body experiences through meditation or spontaneous, all of these things are the subconscious and the superconscious mind knocking at the door of your conscious awareness, which is really only just about 10%. The rest is, in there. We don't tell, the subconscious mind knows its job. If you begin to communicate with it, it will do whatever job you tell it to. It has no critical thinking ability. It's like Google, you just tell it search. And, you just have to utilize it correctly. You don't have to tell yourself, subconscious mind knows its job, just like the heart knows how to beat and the lungs know how to breathe, both also ruled by the subconscious. Any neural pathways that we begin to create just become habit. It's not good or bad. It just is. And looking at things that way, it makes it easier to begin to move forward and create the reality and the world that we want to live in. I have 4 beautiful, healthy granddaughters, and they're highly creative, and they're learning how to create the world. They're dealing with many of the things that are happening. They hear political talk, they hear COVID-19 talk, but the ability to self-accept, learn how to self-soothe, how to put things into perspective, and begin to have some emotional control, even at a young age, is going to help you for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. So I always like to think of the conscious mind as sort of like you said, a Google search. It's just sort of a search engine, right?
Yeah.
The point of the conscious mind is just to look at things. It's like a little spyglass, right?
Yeah.
Whereas there's so much more in there, but it's what you choose to focus on that becomes your reality.
Right. And the consciousness is attached to that light aspect of the human. And the entire body, in fact, is just an antenna. We're using our senses of touch and sight, taste to begin to interpret our environment. Some scientists actually believe that the solar plexus is the first brain, those two huge clusters of nerves, where you get that gut instinct, or you have butterflies, or fear will hit you there. That's because the energy is coming in first to the solar plexus, and then perhaps using the brain as a processor, which is kind of what it does. That
Yeah.
and much more, because the human has this great ability to create. And we look at the world, what can we do? Look at what we've already done. We've taken rock and we turned it into steel, and through the industrial space age, eventually made rockets. We take wood and we create houses. We've made everything. When you look around, even perhaps this grass planted in the yard, all of these things started with a thought.
Yeah.
And we began to manifest it, or man-made, or manufactured. That is what man does, is the manifesting part of us.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have this great power to change, to heal, to self-correct, and to begin to create the world that we want to live in. And through developing personal empowerment skills and tools, beginning the healing process, you'll know, you can ask yourself questions in the moment. You can ask yourself, is this the way I want to be in the world? Is this how I want to sound? Is this what I want to do? Is this how I want to act? If you're saying, no, I don't want to be that person, then no, you can shed that like a skin from a snake and begin to create the world, your life, because that's what it's all about, the ability to manifest. And again, NASA scientists, they tell us that the universe is expanding. We know that. Our consciousness is expanding. They tell us that, well, we know each dimension has a lower, middle, and a higher. They believe that we're in the higher aspect of the third dimension, and that we are moving through this expansion of the universe into the fourth dimension. Fourth dimensional understanding of consciousness will be the more rapid manifestation of our thoughts. The fourth dimension, in order to be able to survive there, one must have emotional control, because as the thoughts become more rapidly manifested, we can harm others with our inability to control ourselves,
Right.
our thoughts, and our minds. And that change some people may refer to as ascension, the ascension process, as we are on the road to higher understanding or human attainment, being
Mm-hmm.
sort of the best human that we can be. And when we get there, sort of our karma has been looked at, and we do our best to understand it. But then you consciously choose a dharma, a path of teaching. And it's a
Yeah.
choice. It's an opportunity to become in service of humanity, so we can make the path a little less difficult. Just point out the way, because ultimately this fourth dimensional expansion will come upon us. And it's with heart and mind and spirit that we can love. And once we master fear, and all emotional negative energy is fear, fear of not being good enough, fear of not being accepted, fear of your own actions, guilt, lack of action.
Yeah.
If you would have did something, you wouldn't feel guilty. It's just lack of action, but it's an opportunity to move forward, each one of these things. So that's where we're at right now. We're about to take that next step here on the planet. And we have an opportunity to begin to become more self-reliant, to trust ourselves, to trust our instincts, and begin to grow in a way that makes us happier and healthier. Maybe taking a second look at what we deem successful. Maybe a big house, when it's empty, doesn't really feel like such a success.
So this is a perfect segue because I usually at about this time take people through a little exercise. And usually this is an exercise to look at what they really want, sort of take them into an ideal situation for themselves. But because you have this wonderful sort of higher sense of consciousness, I'd love it if you could give us a glimpse into what humanity could be like once we've kind of hit this point of ascension, as you've described it. So if you will, can we close our eyes for a moment?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to kind of wave my magic wand here. And now we are exactly where we're supposed to be as humans. Can you tell me what you see and hear and feel?
Peace, love, respect for the planet, the trees that are bursting with fruit to provide the nutrients for the body, to clean the air that we breathe, an ultimate merging of understanding of the planet, what she provides, our role, a sharing of resources, balance, peace, and equanimity, and still growth, moving gently forwards, expanding, moving into a higher place, a place where unconditional love and acceptance is the norm, a place where that love radiates to almost crippling, blinding.
Beautiful. I love that. So in your life in particular, how do you think that would change? Or do you think you're already there?
No, I'm perfectly imperfect. And you never want to confuse the artist with the art.
Absolutely.
Because we are, learning. And, but I'm I'm in a place right now where I am growing and I do experience all forms of love. I have a thriving practice and family and opportunities to teach with the goddess retreats. And that really is so very healing for many women. And so far, they're only open to women. Women have a higher role, as many will become mothers, not everyone, but that's a opportunity right there to create sons, not soldiers.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That was really wonderful. So let me just end on a note of what would you like people to walk away with if they, got nothing else from this? What do you want them to walk away with today?
To open to the idea that they are loved, and that when they can begin to trust that, they'll begin to relax, and that they can begin to move forward, creating the world that they want to live in.
That's so beautiful. So where can the folks listening find you?
Well, you can find me at truehypnotherapy.com. That's my website. Like I said earlier, I was hacked. So it's under construction right now. You can also follow me on Facebook under Laurie McDonald. We also have a True You Hypnotherapy page. And I'm on Instagram and a few other social medias. But feel free to email us also at either workshops at True You Hypnotherapy or info@trueyouhypnotherapy.com.
Thank you so much for this. This is wonderful.
Thanks.